Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Today we're finally going to take a look at Room 25 from Madagot Games. I say finally because this is one of the elder statesmen of my game collection. There's very few games that have been in my collection as long as Room 25 because I cycle so many games out. Maybe like Ascension has been here longer than Room 25, at least the base game of Ascension. Even that's about to be replaced because of the collector's edition, but I digress. And it's interesting, a little side anecdote about Room 25 before I get into it. The very first time I ever met Tom Vassell, I introduced him to Room 25. I had just purchased it maybe a week or two earlier, played it a few times, my group loved it. I decided to make the 2-hour trek down to Miami to go to one of his Tuesday game nights when he used to do it at this store that he no longer attends and doesn't want to speak about anymore. And I know why after having been there. But he had never played Room 25 before. He saw the game and was like, what is that? And I'm like, and he likes to play games with new people that come to the group to introduce himself. So I was like, let's play it, I'll show you. And he loved it. So I was really happy about that. At night is also notable, I'll say, because I got involved in like a 3-hour game of Seasons. It was terrible. I was the only person who had played before, and it was still my favorite game at that point. And the other people just had no idea what they were doing. And they were really, really prone to AP, especially one guy who I've gamed with several times since then and has a reputation for that. So the game just dragged on, and everyone, including Tom, was just giving us sideways looks like, is that game still going on? So that was a bad experience. So actually, now that I think about it, Seasons is also one of the oldest games in my collection. I got them around the same time, Room 25 and Seasons. But in any event, what Room 25 is, people say it's like Cube the movie, which is supposedly a very trashy science fiction movie, which I've never seen. And apparently I'm not missing much, so I'm only taking other people's words for it, but I've had at least 6 different people that I've introduced the game to say, oh, it's like Cube. I was like, okay. It's essentially people get trapped in this futuristic competition. It's like a game show that you're unwittingly or unwillingly involved in. You're thrust into this complex full of shifting rooms, 25 rooms to be exact, and you need to find Room 25. Room 25 is your salvation. If you can get onto that room and use the mechanisms of the facility to move it out of the facility, you will survive and win the game. Now, the interesting part about that is that there are several different modes of play. You might do a fully cooperative mode, you might do a competitive mode, a team mode, or the suspicion mode, which I would usually just call the traitor mode, where potentially 1 or 2 of the people in your crew, depending on the number of players, are going to be guards who are working against you, but you don't know that right off the bat. Let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played. Oh, wait. Let me stop and say one thing. You're probably going to notice that as I put this video up, another review for the expansion to this game is also being put up. That was my impetus for finally reviewing this game after so long. It's going to be hard for me, but I'm going to try to make this just a review about the base game without referencing the expansion too much. So if you hear me complain about the game during the either the overview or my ending thoughts, then know that potentially some of that is going to be fixed by the expansion. I just want to make this inclusive to just the base game for now. So let's do the overview, then we're going to come back and I'll tell you my final thoughts, even though you know that I already like the game. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Room 25, and please excuse my voice, I have a bit of a cold. Now, this game is for 1 to 6 players, and I'm phrasing it that way because there are multiple different modes you can play this game in. You can play it as a solo game. You can play it as a fully cooperative game, which is very similar to the solo mode, obviously. You can play it as a competitive game where it's every person out for themselves, or you can even play it as a team game, or you can play it in my preferred method of play, which is suspicion mode. I'll describe that a little bit more at the end of this overview. The theme of this game is that you are unwilling contestants in this sort of murderous game show where you are trapped in this complex of randomized rooms that are constantly shifting and changing, and you need to find Room 25, hence the title of the game, and move it out of the complex through the mechanisms and controlling things in the complex. If you can do that, depending on what mode you're playing in, you might need to escape with your compatriots as well, then you will win the game. So the first thing you need to do in the game is sort of set everything up. So you have all these different room tiles, and you need to make a structure of 25 tiles, of course. Now the reason I have 2 tiles left out here is because Well, first off, you have to put the central tile here. There's always a central tile flipped face up. Everything else is face down and randomized, and all of your characters will start there. They have these miniatures, which are of an okay quality, I suppose, for board game miniatures, although it would help if they were all colored. Now, the reason I have those 2 blank spaces out there is because there's 2 special rooms. One of them is, of course, the titular, is that how you say that, room 25, and the vision room. These 2 things always need to be included in setup, and they always need to go in one of the 4 corners of the board. So essentially, when you set up the map, you're going to set up all of the central tiles first randomly. Then you're going to randomize the 3 tiles in each corner, making sure to include room 25 and the vision tile in that randomization, so that it'll be, each of those will be in one of the corners. So once you have that set up and you've got the room 25 and the vision tile out there on the board, you will also, every player is going to choose one of the characters. Now, in the base game, there is an expansion for this, but I'm not really going to talk about that. In the base game, every character is essentially the same. Only their color and appearance on their playmat and their player tokens are different, but there's no special powers, no anything. I'll just go through them. They don't even have real names. You have the little girl who's got a cyborg arm, which seems like a great backstory, but it's never talked about. The Colossus, the scientist, who looks like a certain person who's obsessed with flux capacitors, the nerd, the dude, and the very unfortunately and sexistly named the bimbo. All right, so each player is going to have one of these different characters. For the purposes of this, I'll be the little girl, which most people accuse me of being anyways. Once you've got all the boards set up and you've got the round order track set up. Now, this is double-sided depending on the game mode that you're playing in. I'm assuming this is either competition, suspicion, or team mode. You'll have your player markers here. The way that the turn order track is going to work, let me go ahead and focus in on that, is that when you'll randomly determine who's going to go first, and they're going to be at the start of the track. And when that person takes their turn and it's the end of the round, or I'm sorry, when it's the end of the round, you'll move their turn order tracker back down the track, and then the next person will be the first player, and so on, so that the first player becomes the last player, and that's how it's going to go. You're going to keep frog jumping backwards on the round track. Now, the reason it's set up like this is because you can win the game by finding room 25 and getting out, you also lose the game if you run out of time or if too many characters die, depending on the game mode. There's a lot of things depending on what mode you're playing in. But in any game mode, when it gets down to, if someone finds room 25 before you've gotten to round 5, the -5 here, the alarm sounds, and the round tracker immediately moves down to where you have 5 rounds left. Essentially, you enter sudden death mode if you find room 25 too soon. Now, this is a programmed action game, meaning that all the actions that the players take during the game are going to have to be pre-programmed before you actually take them. So you have to lock in actions and then enable them. How this is going to work, you'll go in turn order. Everyone locks in their actions simultaneously. You'll have 2 action tokens you could potentially use, and then you're going to have 2 passes around the game table, starting with whoever is the first player on the track. So whoever's first resolves their first action, then the second player resolves their first action, and so on. Once everyone's resolved their first action, it goes back to the start player, and everyone resolves their second action. So, you'll take one of your, I'll go over the actions in a moment, but you'll take your tokens, place them in the appropriate spots on your player mat, action 1 and action 2, and once you're locked in, you can't change them, and you must resolve your actions even if it ends up being bad for you if the situation in the game changes. Now, you have one alternative here, which is that you can program only 1 action. If you program only 1 action instead of 2, you'll put it between your 2 action spaces on your playmat to symbolize the fact that you may enable that action whenever you choose during the action phase, meaning if you've programmed 1 action and it gets around to your turn, you can decide to use that action for your first action, or you can use it for your second action, depending on what happens in the game. So let me go ahead and describe what the different actions are and what each of the tiles are. Everyone's got the same 4 actions, at least in this game. So first one, let me try to focus in here a little bit. Not that it really matters. You want to see the clip art, people. But first one is looking. The look action allows you to peek at a tile that you are adjacent to. Adjacent in this game is always orthogonal. So if I use the look action on the first round, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, after you're done with the setup, everyone gets to look at 1 tile that is orthogonally adjacent to the setup room. And you do it in turn order, and people can look at the same tile if they want, so that if you're playing in suspicion mode, you can confirm what someone is saying, although most people aren't going to lie with the first peekaboo. But when you take the look action, you're allowed to pick up one tile adjacent to you that hasn't been revealed yet, look at it, so there's the cold room, and then put it back down without revealing it to anyone else. Now, you are not obligated to say anything about that tile to the other players, but if you choose to say something about it, you must say what, you can't say any specific details about it or what the name of the room is. The rooms are all detailed on your player map, by the way, but you can tell everyone what danger level it's at. It's either going to be safe, an obstacle, or danger, or mortal danger, I should say, meaning that it could potentially kill you. That's all you're allowed to say about it, but of course, you could lie. The second type of action that you can take is simply to move. You can take your character and move them orthogonally, adjacent orthogonally, I'm going to stop saying orthogonally, to a space that you're next to. So if it's a revealed tile, then you're great. Then you know what it is, and you should have no problem just simply moving on to it. But if it has not been revealed, it immediately gets revealed, and hopefully you either peeked at it beforehand and knew that it was safe. If not, you may be in for a rude awakening. The third type of action you can take is pushing someone. Now, you can't push someone out of the central room at the very beginning of the game, but from then on, you're fair game. So if I take the push action while I'm here with someone else, I can just immediately push them into an adjacent space. And oh, look at that, I pushed you into jail. Sorry about that. Now, sometimes you may do this because you want to give someone an extra boost as a beneficial thing, but usually pushing someone is not a pleasant thing to do, especially since they can't really resist against it. And the fourth and final type of action you can take is control. This allows you to move the rooms in the complex. I did mention that this complex changes and shifts. How this works is that you pick any row or column except for the row and column that contain the central room. The central room can never be moved, but anything else is potentially fair game. And let you decide which direction you're going to go in, and put one of these little control arrows on the signifying the direction you're moving in. So if I am moving this row or column, however you want to say it, downwards towards the camera, I'm going to pick up this token, slide all this down very, very poorly. You should probably not do what I did and actually leave a space in between all these tiles, because otherwise this happens. And there you go. So it wraps around, in other words. And now the reason you put one of those control markers out there is that for the rest of this round, any other player who decides to move that same column has to move it in that same direction. But at the end of the round, those markers get wiped away, and then it's fair game to move them however you please. Just remember that you can never move the central room. That one is stuck. And the last thing I'll talk about as far as abilities you can do, every player has a token with their color and face on it. This token is a reminder token. You can use it or not use it as you please, but when you reveal or when you peek at a room and you want to remind yourself of something about it, you can throw that marker down on the tile so you know whatever you know. And you may not tell the other players what that signifies at all. It's up to you, but you don't get that token back until that room is revealed. Now, you're probably wondering what all these room tiles are. I'll show you most of them, not all of them. Now, first you have what are called the safe tiles. But this is, by the way, not including room 25 in the vision chamber, which actually I'll explain the vision chamber last. Room 25 is nothing special. You just need to move it out of the area in order to win, which means you have to use a control action at some point during the game, unless, I guess I should have explained this more thoroughly, but move it out with all the team members on it if you're playing a team game, or if you're playing the the suspicion mode, or if it might have to be the last round if too many people died. Anyways, it's too complicated. Who cares? So here are some of the safe tiles. Here's just an empty room. That's not so bad. Here is the moving chamber. Now, if you land on this, if you move your character onto it, you'll do every time you move onto a room, you'll do the effect of it, whether it's good or bad. If you move onto the moving chamber, you're going to pick this up and switch spaces with another unrevealed tile on the board. So it's like a teleportation chamber in some kind of way. Then you have the tunnel chamber or the twin chamber, depending on what edition of the game you have. These link up with each other. So you move on to this one. If the other one has been revealed, you'll land on that one. You instantly teleport. Here, the yellow ones are obstacles. These are not potentially deadly, but they will hinder you in some ways. So you have the vortex room. This one's immediately going to make you go back to the central chamber. This one is the dark chamber. You are not allowed to peek out of this chamber into adjacent rooms. The cold chamber is going to force you to only program one action instead of two. And now we have the mortal chambers, the really deadly ones. This is the poison gas chamber. If one person moves into this chamber, no problem. You see there's like a catwalk along there. But if a second person moves in, they bump the other person into the poison gas, and that first person dies immediately. And they are eliminated from the game. This is the flood chamber. When you move into the flood chamber, it immediately, all the doors lock, and no one else can enter into this room. You can still move out of the chamber, but you have to move out before the end of your next turn. This is the buzzsaw chamber. With the buzzsaw chamber, you move in, you're not dead right away, but you must use your next action to get out, and if you don't, you're dead. Now this is the illusion chamber. This one is not deadly in and of itself, but when you move on to this chamber, you have to immediately exchange it with any hidden room on the board, and then you reveal the new room, and you're subject to the effects of it, which could instantly kill you if it's something like the mortal chamber, which is instant death. You move into it, you die, no questions asked, that's it. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the suspicion mode, which is really my preferred way to play the game. How this is going to work, every other rule is exactly the same, and it is ideally played cooperatively. In other words, you and the other players are working together to find room 25 and get out. However, before you start the game in earnest, each player has to be dealt out one of these identity tiles. Now, it's possible that one of the tiles is simply a prisoner tile. If you get dealt this tile, you're essentially one of the good guys. You need to find room 25 and get out. But you may also get one of the guard tiles, which means you are secretly a guard working for the hosts of the game show, and you are trying to murder the other prisoners and keep them from finding room 25 and escaping. You win the game if you can make the time run out before they can escape, or kill too many of the prisoners, then the guards will win. Now, if you're playing with, the minimum number of players you can play for this mode is 4, and if you're playing with 4 or 5, the game comes with 2 of the prisoner tiles, and then 4 of the prisoner tiles and 2 of the guard tiles. And kind of like in a Shadows over Camelot type way, for 4 or 5 players, you will shuffle in both of the guard tiles and then a number of prisoner tiles. Okay, let me say it this way. If you're playing with 4 players, you're going to shuffle together 4 of the prisoner tiles and 1 guard tile. And if you're playing with 5 or 6 players, you're going to shuffle together 2 of the guard tiles and 4 of the prisoner tiles. What that means is that with 4 or 5 players, it's possible that with 4 players, it's possible there will be no guard, but you won't know that. And then with 5 players, it's possible that there's guaranteed to be 1 guard, but there may be 2, but again, you don't know that. With 6 players, you know for sure there are 2 guards, unfortunately. I think they should have probably given you more of the prisoner tiles in order for that not to happen, but c'est la vie. How this is going to work as far as how you actually find out who is who, if you're a guard, you can willingly reveal yourself as a guard, and if you do, well, everyone knows you're an asshole now, but you are now given the ability to freely program your actions. You do not have to lock them in ahead of time. When your turn comes around, you decide which one of your actions you're going to take. The only thing is you cannot take the same action twice. But also, if one player dies, they don't flip over their identity tile. If a second player dies, the first person flips over their identity tile. And then, same thing if a third person dies. The reason for this is because if 2 players die, then essentially it's game over for the good guys. So you have to be able to see if too many good guys have died. But in any event, that is room 25. There's lots of different ways to play. Suspicion mode really is the best. You're trying to find room 25 and get out, or keep people from finding room 25 and getting out. Let's get to my final thoughts. And of course, in all of my haste, I forgot to actually tell you what the vision chamber does, which is one of the 2 tiles that you have to start the game with and starts in one of the corners. The vision chamber simply, it's a safe tile. When you land on it, you can peek at another tile on the board that has not yet been revealed. Okay, that's it for real this time. Let's get to my final thoughts. Theme and components. I like the theme of the game quite a lot. It really comes out through the gameplay of you being stuck in this facility and not knowing what's in the next room. It could be the murder room, it could just be an obstacle, it could be an empty room, and people could be lying about it, and there's just a lot of tension and angst in the game, and it really comes out. The components are nice. I like the little miniatures. They're not the best quality, but they're board game quality. The artwork on the player mats is good. The artwork on the tiles is all clear and distinct. The tiles are a nice quality, although if you've played this game as much as I have, and you may have even noticed this in the overview, the tiles can get worn pretty quickly, and I am a bit worried about that in the very long term. I don't know what to do about it. They probably make sleeves, like Among the Stars sleeves, that can fit them, but do you really want to sleeve it? The tiles, I'm not sure about that. So that'd be the one sort of thing I would complain about as far as the physical components. Now, sort of tied in with the theme and the mechanics of the game, let me talk about the characters a bit, because this is the #1 complaint that people, including myself, have had about the base game. And that is that there is no distinct personality to any of the characters, which is really a shame when you think about how thematic the setting is. Every character is the same. Every character is just a different color, essentially, and a different stereotypical name, which in some cases is just sort of cringeworthy, like the geek and the jock, but in a couple of cases is very cringeworthy, like the bimbo, which is a very, very unfortunate choice for them to name. It's not really making the case, it's not really helping the case that board gaming is not a sexist hobby. So that was very, very poor choice of words on their part, and I can't really validate that. I don't know why they did that. And it really just sucks that there's no distinct power to any of the characters. They should have had a special power. It makes sense to me. It would have been an easy thing for them to do, and they just didn't. So that's a pretty significant complaint that I've had and that other people have had about the game. Now, moving on to the gameplay, let me say this up front. Do not ever bother with the fully cooperative mode, and probably don't bother with the competitive or the team mode. I have not played team mode, but I have played cooperatively, fully cooperatively. I've played solo, which is essentially cooperative, and I have played competitively. None of them are worth the time. They're okay. I mean, there's still the thrill of potentially getting pushed into a room that is going to, tear you to shreds, and that's, the race against time. But they're not anywhere near as interesting as the suspicion mode. That is what this game is built for, in my opinion. Of course, I like trader games in general. If you don't like trader games, would I recommend this still because of the other modes? Maybe. But everything from the first few play sessions I've had of this game and on, all I have played is suspicion mode because it is so fascinating. You know that there's going to be at least one trader within your midst. Depending on the number of players you have, it might be 2. And that is one restrictive thing. With playing with suspicion mode, you have to have a minimum of 4 players. But the idea that you could be walking into a room and you've got your partner with you and you're like, all right, buddy, you and me, we're going to get through this. Let's look at all these rooms. And the idea that you could just be pushed into death because you happen to be not in the right turn order, that potential for that to happen when you're paired up with someone puts so much distrust and suspicion into the game. It really, really makes it tense and interesting, and it just raises the game to a whole other level, and that's why I'll never play without it again. I love the whole jockeying accusations back and forth, and it feels different than other trader games that I've played because of the way that you have to program your actions, and also the way that by revealing yourself as a guard, you gain tremendous power, the ability to not have to pre-program your actions, to just play them on the fly so long as you don't double up on them. That whole idea is really great, but when do you do it? When do you make that decision? And if you're playing with enough players that there could be 2 potential guards, which I guess would be in almost any case, but when do you hope that there's another guard out there? By revealing yourself, you're letting them know that you're the guard, so you're on my side. You're taking suspicion off of everyone else. Like, well, there's a possibility there's not another guard. Let's just go ahead and behave like the rest of us are good guys. That whole dynamic is really, really great. So I think suspicion mode is the only way to play this game. The rest of the game mechanics are interesting. I don't normally like pre-programmed games. It works here because the game is relatively simple. You only have a few different actions that you could potentially do. And at the beginning of the game, it's very evident what you should be doing, just sort of spreading out to the corners, trying to find that room 25 and peeking first. It's only near the end of the game that it starts to get a little more tense. Now, that could be considered a fault of the game, and it's something I've run into, is that there can be stretches within the middle and sort of in the 3/4 mark of the game that are pretty uneventful and anticlimactic because once you find room 25, it's just sort of on. Then it's like a race against time. But even then, if room 25 is found relatively quickly, even though the alarm sounds and it gets cut down to half the rounds, you still have to last the whole rest of the time. Now, if it's really easy for you and you all get onto room 25, and you can kind of stymie or stymie the guards that way. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Everyone else makes fun of me for saying that. But I've seen instances where people just camp out on room 25 and run out the clock by continually using the control action and moving the room around. That can happen. It's kind of anticlimactic. It's better if one of the guards lulls everyone into a false sense of security and then in the last round pushes someone out. But even that can sort of feel like a less than satisfying win. So there can be some anticlimactic moments in the game, but overall I think it's still solid. I think the mechanics are simple, but they work well. I love all the different rooms and what they can do. They're all very thematic. The flooding room and the instant death room, the mortal room. There's just a lot of interesting things here. There's a lot of variety to the game, so long as you only play the suspicion mode, which sounds like there wouldn't be a lot of variety, but trust me, that's the best way to play it. It's a solid trader game with an interesting theme. It only needs special powers for the characters in order to make it even better than the rest of its parts, but it's still a fantastic game. That is Room 25 from Madagot.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.